In the last lesson, we added our UI for our main home view controller where we are displaying our categories. So the next step is to create our Zib and our category cell class. Okay, so here under view over here, where I'm going to right click and say new file, and we are going to create a CocoaTouch class file here. We're going to say next. And this is going to be a UI collection view cell. Okay, we're going to call this category cell. Now, normally we don't create a Zib cell, but in this case we are. So go ahead and check that and say next. And then go ahead and have both targets selected again and say create. All right, so we have our category cell.swift file and our category cell.zib. Okay, so I'm going to take this zib file here, and let me see here. We have a zibs file here, but that's going to be specific to Artable. So let's create a new one up here. Say new group and say zibs. Okay, we're going to drag this zib file into our zibs folder. And we can go ahead and start making our category cell. Okay, so what is this zib file? This is just a view. It's a category cell view, just like you would see, like we've been doing in the past when we drag in a collection view cell into a category or into a collection view, and then we add the UI. It's the same thing that we are doing right here. It's just kind of separated. It's outside of the collection view. It's out on its own. It's just a view, okay? So we have our category cell here, and what we need to do, if we take a look at our simulator, is we are going to need an image, and then below that image, a label for the category name. So let's go ahead and do that. Doesn't really matter the size of your view here. I'm gonna go ahead and make mine about 100 wide by 150 tall. And the reason that doesn't really matter is because we're going to be programmatically resizing the collection view cells based on the width of the device screens. So let's go ahead and add an image here. So I'm going to say image, drag that right in here, resize it. There we go. And then we're going to put in a label and just drag that in right here. And I'm going to resize this. Let's do 150 wide and 200 tall, just to make this a little bit bigger and easier to work with. All right, so resize that. So let's constrain our label here. Let's go 8 from the left, 8 from the bottom, and 8 from the right. And we'll center the text. So here in its attributes inspector, center it. And let's just change this to category name for now. And then let's change the font. Change that to custom and set the family to Futura. And say done. And then in case we have some long category names, let's go ahead and enable the minimum font scale and set that to 0.5. That way, if we have a long category name, it will shrink it down so that it fits on a single line right here. Now for our image view, let's go ahead and constrain it. We'll go 0, 0, 0, and 8 from the bottom and add those for constraints. And let's go ahead and add a placeholder image here. Let's see, do we have anything in here yet? It doesn't look like we do. Let's go ahead and grab one of our images that we'll be using inside of the Artable assets that you received in the resources for this project. Under product images, let's go ahead and grab one of these animals. I'm going to grab animal 2. But first, make sure that you have your assets open. There we go. So I'm going to grab animal 2 and just drop that right here into the assets. Or I guess that was Arial 2. And then coming back to our category cell Zib, just as a placeholder so we can kind of see what it's going to look like, I'm going to put in Arial 2 here. change the content mode to aspect fill. And we got a little error here. If we click right here, we have the content priority ambiguity. Okay, so we can fix that just by clicking here and saying decrease the vertical compression resistance from 750 to 749. And we can say yes. Let's change that priority. And now we don't have any more red lines, and we can select our image here. And we're going to go ahead and set clip to bounds right here. And that looks good. Now what we can do is let's go ahead and add our IB outlets to our category cell. So holding Option, I'm going to click on category cell.swift, and we need outlets for the image and the label. So with the image selected, I'm going to Control and drag, and we're going to call this category image and say connect. And then for the name label, I'm going to Control and drag and say category label and connect. Very good. I'm going to close our assistant editor, go back to our standard editor, and click on our, I'm going to save this and click on our category cell.swift. And again, if we look at our simulator, we can see that our category image has some rounded corners. So here in the awake from nib, I'm going to go ahead and round those corners. So I'm going to say category image dot corner or dot layer dot corner radius is equal to 5. And then, just like we've done in our previous lessons when we are working with table views and collection views, we're going to create a function here called configure cell, where we will configure the cell's UI. And we're going to pass into this function a category, okay, of type category. And then we can set the category image and labels accordingly. So I can say category label dot text is equal to category that we passed into this function dot name. And then for the image, we can get the URL. We're going to create a URL from it. So we're going to say if let URL is equal to URL, and we create the URL from its string constructor, and the string that we pass in is the category.image URL. And then with that URL, we can set the category image using Kingfisher. So I'm going to import Kingfisher here, and then we can say category image.kf.set image with resource URL. Oh, that should be a lowercase URL. There we go. So now we have our category cell.zip file and our category cell.swift file set up. With all of that, we are now ready to go back to our home vc.swift file and hook up all of our collection view delegate methods. Okay, so down here at the bottom, let's go ahead and put this in an extension. So we're back here in our home vc.swift, and I'm going to say extension home vc, and we are going to add our UI or UI collection view delegate UI collection view data source and UI collection layout. Let's see here, UI collection view delegate flow layout. There we go. There we go. So with those three protocols, we are able to do everything that we need to do with collection views. This is going to tell us that we need to add some methods to conform to the protocol. Those required methods are, of course, number of items in section. And let's go ahead and create a variable for our categories. So I'm going to say var categories is equal to an array of category, and we'll initialize that to an empty array. And so down here in the number of items in section, we'll return categories.count. The next required method to conform to the protocols is the cell for row, or sorry, cell for item at, and let's see, I think we want this one right here for item at index path. Nope, not this one. It's kind of hard to tell when there's multiple constructors and we can't see it all. I think it's this one that we want right here, that returns a UI collection view cell. There we go. All right, and just like we've done before, we're going to say if let cell is equal to collection view dot dq reusable cell with reuse identifier. And we haven't set a reuse identifier yet, so let's go ahead and do that. That's going to be here in our category cell.zib, and we select our category cell. Then here under the identifier, we're going to say category cell, okay? And I'm going to make that capital, both capitals. I'm going to copy that, and let's go ahead and create a constant for that right now. So here under utils, let's go to our constants.swift, and let's create a new struct for identifiers. Okay, so I'm going to say struct identifiers, and we're going to call this one static let category cell equal, and I'm going to paste what we had there, which is category cell. All right, I'm going to save that, and you'll notice that this is the name of the class. It's also the name of the category cell.zib, and it's the name of the reuse identifier, all three of which we are going to need to use, and so it makes sense to name them the same thing, okay? So I'm going to save that, save our category cell.zib file, and come back to our home vc.swift. So now with our reuse identifier, we can say identifiers.category cell for index path. And we are going to cast that as a category cell. And then we're going to take that cell and we're going to configure it. So I'm going to say cell.configure cell, and we just need to pass to it the categories at index path dot item. And finally return that cell. If we are unable to dequeue a cell, then we are just going to return a UI collection view cell, just like that. Now let's go ahead and set up the size for our cells. So that's going to be size for item at, there we go. And we're going to calculate a cell width and height based on the device's width. So I'm going to say let width equal view.frame.width. Okay, so this is just getting the width of the current device that this app is running on. And for our cell width, what we're going to do is we're going to say let cell width equal, and that's going to be width, the device width, and we're going to subtract 50 from that, and then we're going to divide that by 2. Now you may be wondering, where does this 50 come in? So if we go back to our storyboard, remember that our collection view itself is inset 20 from each side. So we need to subtract 40 to account for that. And then if you look at our min spacing, you'll see that we have 10 right there. So that accounts for, so that makes up that 50. One thing that we want to do is have a section inset of 10 from the top. Okay, and that just gives a little bit of space at the top so that the collection view doesn't start with cells touching the top of the navigation controller up here. All right, very good. Now let's go back to our home vc.swift. So we know where the 50 comes from. We divide that by 2 so that we have an equal width for each of our cells. And then for our height, what we're going to do is just kind of apply a 1.5 aspect ratio. So we're going to say let cell height equal cell width times 1.5. And then we are going to return a CG size, and we can use this guy right here. We can say cell width, and the height is cell height. Perfect. All right, so before I forget, let's go ahead and set our delegates. So let's say collection view dot delegate is equal to self. Collection view dot data source is equal to self. Now here's the part that is different because we are using zibs for our collection view cells. Since we didn't create the collection view and storyboard with a prototype cell, this collection view doesn't know what kind of views it's supposed to display. So what we do is called registering the nib. Okay, so remember zibs and nibs are used mostly interchangeably. So I'm going to say collection view dot register, and you can see a few options here. We have cell class, nib, two nibs. We're going to use this one here. Register the nib for cell with reuse identifier. Okay, so the nib we need to supply, so we create a nib. So I'm going to say UI nib, and we initialize it with a nib name and a bundle. All right, so the nib name is simply category cell, and we have a constant for that we created. So I'm going to say identifiers dot category cell. For the bundle, you can put nil. And then for the cell with reuse identifier, we also have the identifiers dot category cell constant for that as well. All right, so we have registered our category cell zib file. So now it knows what type of views this collection view is supposed to display. And I think we should be able to run this. Now, right now, it's not going to display anything because we're not hooking up to Firestore. We don't have any of that data. So let's go ahead and test this by simply creating a manual cell, okay? So I'm gonna say let category equal, I'm gonna initialize a new category, say dot init. So we need a name. So I'm going to say nature. For the ID, I'm just going to put in a random string. For the image URL, let's go ahead and grab that in a second. Is active is true. And for the timestamp, I'm just going to say timestamp and initialize that. That'll set the timestamp to be the current timestamp when this category is initialized. All right, now for the image URL, let's go ahead and just grab something from the internet. I'll run over to unsplash.com, and let's see if we can grab a download URL here. Let's see here, copy image address, and we'll go over back into Xcode, and let's see if this works. Just gonna paste that. All right, let's see if that works. Save that, and then right here, we're going to say categories dot append new element, and we're going to add that category. All right, so now if all goes according to plan, when we run this, we should see a single category cell with the name of nature and the image of not even sure what I grabbed. What is that? Okay, so some shoes. I didn't really look at what I was grabbing, so a pair of shoes. All right, so let's run this. And there we go. Now we are seeing our very first category cell, which we kind of just manually created. So the next step is to be able to have that data be stored up in Firestore and be able to pull them down and display them. So that's going to be some pretty exciting stuff. But first up, we need to do kind of the same thing that we did here, but in the next view controller. So we can see in our finished app. Let me see if I can just swap over there. Next thing that we're going to be working on is getting this view all set up as well. All right. So I hope you're excited for that, and I will see you in the next one.